That was then, and this is now. Gone are the days from 2016 when millions took to the streets across the U.S. in anger over Donald Trump's victory. Demonstrators at the time smashed windows as they chanted, "We reject the president-elect." This time, his victory was met with some tears, some canceled classes, and for many, their favorite comfort food. Throughout this entire week, the University of Puget Sound in Washington is offering students cupcakes and calm music in the campus rotunda, as well as arts and crafts and activities like beading and painting. On Election Day itself, Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy in Washington, D.C., provided students with self-care sweets, including coloring books, hot chocolate, and cookies, as they waited for the emotional intensity of the day to hopefully blow over. And teachers across the country scrapped lesson plans yesterday.
So this leads us to ask ourselves what happened, what changed, and what can we expect on Inauguration Day. So, Amber, one thing I would say about this is part of it isn't that surprising because the result itself was not massively shocking, I don't think, of the election in a way that was not, that's very different from 2016. In 2016, Democrats and Liberals thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win easily. She lost while prevailing in the popular vote. There was all the allegations of, to use Mr. Trump's phrase, Russia, Russia, Russia. And so there was all this Democratic outrage. He has won really very comfortably and won the popular vote, it seems, by at least a couple of million. I know they're still counting votes in California. So I think that perhaps takes the edge off some of the shock or outrage felt in 2016. But I wonder also, as part of it, just Liberal fears about what kind of country they are living in, because they felt that, yes, we had fears about Donald Trump in 2016, then you had his presidency, then you had January the 6th, then you had all the things that he says, and he gets re-elected again. So I think part of it is just a sort of dislocation on the part of Democrats or Liberals who aren't really sure of the country they're living in anymore.
Maybe so. I think you're onto something with the Democrats not being all that surprised. Mm-hmm. I have always thought that Kamala's internals must be much worse than the public polling was. I think people close to the campaign probably had a sense that this was coming. The fundamentals of the race were all stacked against her. As much as they wanted to win on vibes and calling Trump a fascist, that was sort of like the last minute Hail Mary. And on this college question, we had a reporter from The Spectator go to this McCourt School of Public Policy safe space, and it didn't seem like there were that many students there. And maybe we can chalk that up to the fact that Trump performed extraordinarily well with voters under 30, right? Mm-hmm. He won young men outright in some places. Overall, I think he won the young men nationwide, and then on the youth vote got, 45% of them?
Yeah, it was certainly a big increase.
And gained 7% among Gen Z women, mm-hmm. which was supposed to be sort of the calling card for Kamala Harris. I just anecdotally walking around the day after the election, I was headed to the Lansing airport on my way back to DC, and everything just seemed pretty normal.
Yeah.
It was like business as usual.
Yeah, and I think to that point about the vibes, one thing that I got slightly sick of hearing during the campaign was this comparison between Kamala Harris this year and Barack Obama when he first ran for the presidency in 2008. And certainly on TikTok and other social media platforms, you got this claim that enthusiasm was bubbling over for Kamala Harris. I remember the 2008 Obama campaign. I'm old enough to have covered it. And there was an enormous emotional intensity around that campaign. Obviously, he was the first really viable black candidate for president. Jesse Jackson had run 20 years before, but that was a different time. And just Obama himself inspired this kind of excitement, obviously among Democrats. Kamala Harris was someone who the Democrats, I think, largely settled on because there was no one else who they could easily get to. They had concluded that Biden was certain to lose. They had concluded, I think, that you couldn't have an open primary because then you may have ended up leaping past the incumbent vice president. And so it's we got to roll the dice on Kamala. And that was fine. And I mean, obviously Democrats passionately wanted her to win, but this idea that she was sort of leading some impassioned popular movement, I never really bought that.
Yeah, that was, I think, a pipe dream that they wanted to will into existence that wasn't actually there. I think maybe one of the other reasons why people are not freaking out the way that they were in 2016 is I would take your point about Trump already being in office for 4 years a little bit differently, which is that things weren't as crazy as people thought they were going to be the first time around. I mean, he won over a significant portion of the Republican Party, a lot of whom, especially the establishment, did not like him. They thought he was literally going to destroy the party. Instead, he's created this multiracial working class coalition that he actually expanded on the map this time around. And even though towards the last couple of weeks of the campaign, you had people like Hillary Clinton comparing him to Nazis, Kamala Harris calling him outright a fascist. She also said in her concession speech, though, hey guys, everything's going to be okay. And so I have to wonder how many people legitimately believed that Trump is a fascist and is going to refuse to let go of power and is going to jail all of his political enemies and all of these other very hyperbolic statements. I think maybe it was more of a rhetorical flourish and a campaign strategy than it was any real legitimate fear.
I don't know, Amber, that it's fair to say that that's hyperbolic, because Trump himself had said many of these things. It wasn't that they were invented. The debate over whether he's a fascist or not, I never really loved, because I think sometimes those debates become semantic to no real good effect. But look, he had said, for example, that he will seriously consider pardoning everyone convicted of January the 6th related offences, and he had called those people hostages and political prisoners. He had said, just very recently, that maybe we should throw Jack Smith out of the country. And there is a number of statements like that where his supporters tend, in my opinion, to take refuge in this idea of like, oh, well, he's not really serious. It is true that in his first term, it wasn't mostly quite as crazy as some people expected. But was that because Trump sort of wound himself in? Or was that because there were people in that administration who actually did sort of restrain him to some extent? Exactly the kind of people, I might add, who he doesn't want to be in the administration that is about to come into being.
I think there's a difference between restraining Trump and working in the shadows to thwart agenda, which is what those people did in the first administration and why Trump doesn't want them there. But the idea that because Jared Kushner told him, hey, don't put Hillary in jail, Trump was like, okay, you're right, I'm not going to do that. I don't buy that. I think if Trump wanted to do it, he would have done it. But he recognizes that this was a moment for him to try to unite the country. He said, of course, in his victory speech that that's what he wanted to do. It was one of the first things he mentioned. And I do think that sometimes we read a little bit too much into sort of his stand-up comedy routine he does at rallies as like legitimate policy proposals. And it's sort of this old adage that people say about Trump, which is you can, what is it? You can take him seriously.
But not literally.
Yes.
Well, literally, but not seriously.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
He is such a bizarre political figure in many ways because, like, of course I know what you mean when you say we read too much into the stand-up comedy routine and he cycles through the greatest hits, but no other political figure in either party gets that amount of leeway. Like, if Harris mangles her words, or if Biden says something dumb, or if Obama says something politically inastute, we never allow those people the leeway of saying, oh, well, we shouldn't take them seriously.
Well, I think to be fair, one of the reasons why that's the case is that there's a fundamental difference in the way Trump talks about the political landscape and the way the Democrats have during this past campaign, and even when Joe Biden was running in 2020 and Hillary Clinton in 2016, which is that Trump mostly focuses his ire, if not all of it, on the politicians and the elites, whereas the Democrats often make the mistake of facing their ire on the voters. Mm-hmm. And so the voters say, well, these people have been destroying us for the past 4 to 8 years. I'm okay if Trump is a little aggressive rhetorically against them. Do I really want him to throw Jack Smith in the Potomac River or whatever it was?
I certainly hope not, April.
Well, as long as he has like a life vest on, I think it would be fine. Yeah. But again, it's like finally this guy is like standing up for me against these people who have made my life effing miserable. Whereas the Democrats actually blame me for having legitimate concerns about the way they've run the country. Yeah. And so in that sense, I think they do give him some leeway because he's the only person who's willing to speak aggressively against some real, like, frankly, dark forces in their lives.
We will be back with more of Amber's generous interpretation of Mr. Trump and my less generous interpretation soon. More Rising after this.